Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku was part of a vigilante care program? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Shota Aizawa was many things: a teacher, hero, husband. What he wasn't was qualified to deal with this situation. A man, surely it was a man, please let it be a man, holding two beat-up people in an alley. He was short, a little too short for a grown man. He was wearing all black. A mask was covering the bottom half of his face, although the boy's man's green hair was still visible. They were doing some sort of deal. The boy man said. He gestured to a few nearby bags. I'm sure you'll find the evidence in there. With that, the man took off upwards. He had some sort of grappling tech. Before Shota truly knew what was going on, the man was already running along the rooftops. His movements were eerily similar to Shota's own. Once he had delivered the men to police custody, he resumed patrol. Despite Shota's efforts, his mind kept wandering. You didn't meet vigilantes very often, much less one who didn't boast about his actions. Vigilantes were usually around because they disapproved of heroes. They were very vocal about their opinions. Even the ones with good intentions, all they want their messages to be heard. Which was why it was quite odd for this vigilante to be so quiet. As he came home that night, he tumbled into bed. Hizashi had already passed out, so Shota would have to wait before he could tell him about the man. They had a new vigilante to look out for. As time passed, Shota didn't even realize the boy man had become a part of his daily life. Well, to clarify, his nightly life. Wherever Shota seemed to go, the man had arrived before him. He had dealt with every situation quickly without problems. He then left the criminals tied up and someone would pick them up eventually. He never made himself known to the public or tried to talk to anyone other than what was necessary. He was the very opposite of what a vigilante should be. It had been months, but each time Shota reached out, he was denied. The man wouldn't answer any of the questions he asked, no matter how personal or random they were. Rumors amongst underground heroes had begun to spread. A small, quick, stealthy vigilante who took down small criminals. So far nobody knew anything about him, not even his quirk. Shota had wanted to use erasure, but he never got the chance. Whenever he arrived at the site of commotion, the vigilante had wrapped the criminals up already. His various contacts had confirmed it was the same with all previous interactions with the man. The strangest thing about the man was how he hadn't been caught. Due to vigilantes striving for public attention, a majority were caught quickly. Especially those who worked with small crimes. This man wasn't even really known to the police force. The only ones who knew of this new vigilante were his victims and the heroes who cleaned up the aftermath. He was the biggest mystery the underground hero world had for quite a while. So he got a lot of attention very quickly amongst the heroes. Someone who diffuses a situation before even the heroes arrive would be a valuable asset. Even if someone wanted to recruit him, they could never learn anything from the man. A forum had been opened soon after his appearances started. Very quickly it turned into a popular place where the underground heroes talked about the mystery vigilante, as he was called. New theories developed each day, and no, Shota was not a part of it. Of course not. Hizashi was, and Shota just so happened to be listening when Hizashi talked about it. From that information Shota could put it together. His patrol routes met with the vigilante most often. Meaning out of everyone he saw the man the most. For some reason this gave him an odd sense of pride. Months went by and nothing changed. People theorized what lay behind the mask, nothing came up. Somehow Hizashi had spoken to the UA teachers. Now a fair bit of them were involved. The whole situation had spiraled out of control, from something genuine into a bit of a joke. They'd even spawned a betting pool about his capture, identity, and quirk. To be honest, it was just something for heroes to keep themselves occupied. The theories slowly stopped coming and they seemed to accept the mystery of this vigilante. They couldn't catch him, talk to him, or discover anything about him. As the fall slowly came to a close and the cold settled in, Shota saw less of the man. He appeared less and less, especially on cold nights. As much as this vigilante interested Shota, The man wanted to keep his distance. The man wanted mystery. Shota could respect that. As long as he didn't do anything stupid, Shota would let him slide. That particular opinion of his changed on a cold January morning. If you could call 2 a.m. morning, that is. He came upon the vigilante as he was still fighting. Shota watched as the man weaved his way through the criminals. He obviously didn't need much help, but Shota stepped in anyways. A man who had never been seen fighting criminals before, now caught, made him wary. Perhaps something was wrong? The longer the fight went on, the more likely this man would be found by the police. Vigilantism is illegal, but the man isn't doing any harm. Shota doesn't want him in police custody. So he steps in, and in a minute everyone has been apprehended. Shota faced the man head-on for the first time. He's practically memorized the man's back and side profile. It felt strange to make eye contact. The man did the exact opposite of what Shota expected. He prepared for a puffing of chests or thanks or something. Instead, the man seemed to shrink when Shota's gaze called upon him. Shota knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The man who evaded them for months stood before Shota, for some reason not leaving. "You okay?" The man's eyes flicker with emotion. "Yeah, they're just rookies." He stretched out his shoulders. They couldn't get a hit in. Shota had heard the man speak many times before. Short orders, and synopsis of what happened. His voice sounded different this time, lighter. "Good." There was a moment of awkward silence. The man made his way to leave when Shota called out, "Wait." The man paused but didn't turn around. "What do I call you? You've been around for a while now and nobody knows what to call you." He made no acknowledgement of Shota's question. He actually moved a few feet further away, before pausing once more. "A dash," Shota frowned. The hesitancy and unsureness in his voice was odd. "Deku." "What?" "Deku. You can call me that." The man, no Deku, flew up the alley and was gone. Shota glanced back over the villains. "Deku. Huh." He brought his new information to the forum. As he suspected everyone was jealous, Shota was first to have a real conversation with Deku. The revolving of his name seemed to open a few of the closed doors Deku had. He was more open in helping the underground heroes in fights. He never approached them, but every now and then they'd get tips. Tips about human trafficking, drag trades, things too big for a single vigilante to handle. Each of these tips was signed, Deku. It has been a year since Shota had first seen the vigilante. While he still felt distant, Shota for some reason was proud of the lengths they'd come. He supposed Deku reminded Shota of himself. What could have happened to him if UA didn't work out? As the weather gradually became warmer, something came across Shota's desk. It was a weapons deal. It was on the larger scale of things, meaning he'd have to bring along a few extras. He didn't have much information, but it seemed a gang from America was smuggling weapons and maybe even drags into the local areas. Thus came one of the hardest parts of being an underground hero, knowing you won't have enough numbers for the situation. Even if he asked everyone, most people would be busy. They had other hero obligations or their own lives. As much as Shota would love to call in Hizashi, it wouldn't work. He needed people who could stay under radar, keep this under wraps from the public. As he called in for help, funny enough, a certain someone kept coming to mind. As he addressed the last person on his call list, he asked, "Hey, what do you think of Deku joining this raid?" The raid was scheduled for a Wednesday night, shortly after midnight. So, Shota, Ms. Joke, Mr. Brave, Bubble Girl, and Centipede were in a briefing before the raid. Compared to normal nights, this was a large handful of heroes. However, the tension in the room was thick as they waited for Deku's arrival. For someone who always seemed to arrive early at crime sites, he was late to this meeting. It had taken days of tracking down the guy and practically begging him to join. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually the man had agreed. And so that left the group of them waiting for Deku to come. It was an understatement to say that Shota was worried he wouldn't show. Thankfully, a few minutes later, Deku came in, followed by one of the few officers on the case. His posture was awfully stiff and closed off. He didn't speak but nodded in acknowledgement to the heroes. His left eye had a cut slightly above it, and the cut looked fresh. No doubt he'd come late due to a fight then. Shota took the lead and quickly debriefed the group. First things first, We want to stay as low as possible, no property damage. We don't need the public to know about this. Which is why I don't need to remind you once again to finish this quickly with no destruction. Everyone nodded, they knew this already. Even if some of them were heroes who were known, they all kept their property damage levels to minimum. Their quirks were easy to maintain and control. I'll be honest, but we really don't know that much. Our source only picked up the date and time. Regardless, whatever they're smuggling is dangerous and we should be careful. Shota held his hand out. A young officer placed a folder into his hand. Shota opened it. A few pictures from surveillance cameras appeared. These are the men we know things about. He pointed to a short brunette. This is Edo Tanaka. His quirk is whistle. He can release high-pitched sound waves, only for a few seconds at a time. He shifted to the next picture, a woman with long red hair, Yui Hashimoto. Her quirk allows her to expand her limbs. She can only expand one limb at a time. Shota shuffled through the rest of the photos explaining each of their quirks. Most of their ideas of their quirks were vague or unknown. This wasn't anything unusual for the heroes. They were used to going in with very little information on situations. Then Deku leaned across the table and pointed at one of the pictures. Her quirk disorients you, or does something to affect your brain. A few surprised looks came about. This paper has someone who witnessed her robbing a bank. That was her first crime, so I bet she wasn't aware of how important it is to keep your quirk hidden. The witnesses claimed people who tried to stop her just backed off. So it might be a verbal command, but this witness says that she touched all of them, meaning it probably has something to do with touch. So if she touches you, she can mess with your head. The people who were hit say they don't really remember much. However, I don't think it has anything to do with memory because they could still identify her and vaguely recall events that happened afterward. It makes most sense for it to be disorientation or something along those lines. It would be best to ignore her or apprehend her last. Her quirk won't be a problem unless she makes contact. Eraserhead could also use his capture gear to just tie her up. Then we should dash. As he divided further into his explanation, his speech got quicker and quieter. Soon enough, he was muttering too fast for anyone to keep up. He came to an abrupt stop once he seemed to realize nobody could understand him. Nobody moved a muscle as Deku finished his speech. I mean it well makes sense. I might be totally wrong though dash. No, that all checks out. Ms. Joke says with her trademark smile. Shota? Found someone clever for once. Shota simply grumbles in response. Do you think you could do that for all of them? They had quirk analysts on their team, but they were very new at their jobs. All the newbies were usually sent to the underground heroes. However, being a quirk analyst wasn't an easy job. Deku simply nods and he works through each of their known suspects. He provided a thorough analysis provided on the witness reports, any security footage. Safe to say everyone was impressed. Once again that feeling of pride came over Shota. When they finally disembarked to the warehouse, it was a good hour or so later. They were going to have to stake the place out before they could make their move. Shota had been placed with Deku. Both of the heroes best known for their quick captures, they were to stay in hiding, only joining the fight once they are in a frenzy. Then the two could quickly apprehend anyone there. They lapsed into comfortable silence, well, almost silence. Deku kept shifting his feet, he was always moving. Nervous? He asked as the younger man shifted again. You could say that. They went back into silence, waiting. Finally, a large white van pulled in. A few people came out, a few wore masks or some sort of disguise. Most did not bother hiding their identities. These were most of the men and women Shota had already known would be here. He heard the breathing of Deku gradually increase. He wasn't hyperventilating, but he didn't sound relaxed. Shota knew he shouldn't talk. He wasn't supposed to do anything right now. They had to stay quiet and bide their time until the second group arrived for the deal. Once the exchange began, they could act. But Deku's breathing continued to get worse. He shifted as quietly as he could. You have backup. Shota whispered. Deku stiffened at the words. Shota knew Deku hadn't ever had backup before, but he'd also never dealt with this big of a bust before. Deku seemed to keep his breathing in check as they waited for the other party to show up. When they finally arrived, they all waited. Ms. Joke was to make the first move, once she did the rest would follow. They waited patiently as two gruff men made conversation between the parties. One of them signaled to their truck. Shota's heart stopped for a minute as some lackeys brought forward 5 children. This wasn't in their intel. Shota couldn't see perfectly from where he was, but they couldn't be much older than 12 or there were 3 girls and 2 boys. A woman came forward and Shota recognized her, Ichika Shibata. She used to be a nurse, but was caught money laundering and since then she'd been involved in a few crimes. She'd been in and out of jail for the past 20 years or so. She pulled out a first aid kit and proceeded to do a basic checkup on the kids. Once she finished, she nodded to the man, his face was still covered. They took the kids over to the other side of the room. This caused a shift in their plans. They now have to protect the civilians and apprehend the suspects. Shortly after Ms. Joke flew into action. Shota quickly followed. He did his job, dodging from bullets and quirk attacks. He tied up as many people as he could. After the initial minute or so of panic, he turned to the kids. Only to find Deku already there, he was leading them away from the frenzy. Whenever anyone came too close, he would deal with the criminals, while trying to keep the kids safe. It wasn't the fastest or safest method, but everyone had their hands full. Before he knew it, the kids were out of fighting range. Deku came back a few minutes later to assist them. That sent a stab or worry through Shota. He shouldn't have left the kids unattended, but there was nothing he could do right now. A few close calls later and a large majority of the 2 groups had been captured. Shota left Ms. Joke, Mr. Brave and the rest to manage the villains. He went to go find where the kids were. Where he found Deku, already returned to them. Deku was making large animated movements with his hands, and seemed to be talking to them. The kids, obviously terrified, didn't smile or acknowledge the vigilante. However, Deku didn't stop. He kept muttering and made hand motions to the group. Shota smiled fondly at the scene before he'd even noticed. He walked up until he was next to the little group. A few kids flinched and one even yelped in fear. "No, no, no, no," Deku said rather rushedly. "It's okay, this is my friend." He brought a hand over to cover his mouth. "Wanna hear a secret?" He yelled to the kids. "He's a real hero. He knows Present Mike? They're best friends. Do you guys know who Present Mike is?" Before Shota could even process that Deku had pieced together how close he and Hisashi were, the only kid that seemed relatively okay was asking him questions. Of course it was Hisashi that would get them talking. Soon enough they all wanted to know if they could be on Present Mix radio show. Shota wanted to give Deku a light glare for shoving all these kids on him, but the man was already gone. Shota wished he could say he was surprised that the vigilante left so soon, but he really wasn't. As they wrapped up the police work, Shota made his way back home. Once there he found Hisashi on the kitchen counter grading papers. "Hey there." Hisashi greeted him with his usual smile. "Hi." Hisashi opened his mouth. Shota assumed to ask about the deal, but Shota kept talking. "The vigilante hero, Deku." Hisashi nodded to show he was listening. "He's a good kid." Shota reached over the coffee pot, only for Hisashi to smack his hand away. "You don't need coffee this late at night." He paused for a moment. "Kid." Shota gave Hisashi a confused look. "I thought Deku was an adult." "He is." Shota confirmed, then hesitated. He reminds me of my class. I don't know why. He's more responsible and talented than most of my students right now. I just don't get him. Every vigilante has some huge message they want to spread. But this kid doesn't, he just deals with crime and moves on." Shota ran a hand through his dark locks. "And he isn't even stupid about it either. He only deals with small situations, the ones he knows he can handle. All the big stuff he passes on to the pros." He gave a long sigh. "He's practically already the definition of an underground hero. I just don't get why he's decided to become a vigilante. He could be helping more people if he got his license." Hisashi smiled. Shoutsa didn't talk much. When he did though, he talked quite a bit. "Sounds like you're worried." He chuckled lightly. "I am worried. Some 20-year-old guy is beating up criminals. With no backup or call for help. You never call for help and rarely bring backup." Hisashi pointed out, only to have Shota glare at him. "Sorry." He said cheekily he marked a few questions wrong on the test he was grading. You want to help the guy? A nod. So help him. How can I help someone who never sticks around long enough? Hizashi nodded into their living room, where their cat sat on the couch. She hated you, hated people. Now look at her, just do the same thing you did for her. Shota gave Hizashi a deadpanned look. Deku isn't a cat. No, but he could be looking for a mentor. Just get close to him slowly, you managed to get him on the deal tonight. That's progress, just take your time and wait. Your stray will come to you soon enough. Shota reached over to give him a light slap on the head. Yeah, whatever, he muttered, and then quieter, to himself he whispered. A stray, really Hizashi? Shota knew getting close to Deku would be hard. However, if he knew he would have competition, maybe he would have quit long ago. The kid Vigilante. Works one drag bust, collaborates one time, now everyone knows him. The only thing Shota had to compliment them on was their secrecy. Yes, vigilantism was illegal. And yes, they could tip the police off about his whereabouts. And yes, Deku had committed a few crimes every now and again. And yes, everyone has unanimously decided that this vigilante was perfectly fine on his own. Somehow people began to think Shota was Deku's partner. Which didn't lead to them talking to him to contact Deku. No, it led to them competing with him to win over Deku. For some reason, every pro hero who had worked with Deku wanted to partner up with him. Perhaps not officially, but they wanted the vigilante to do analysis and help out on some occasions. Everyone on the forum was trying to contact him. It was very amusing for Hizashi, not so much for Shota. If anything though, Deku reacted to this newfound popularity badly. Which wasn't what Shota expected. Frankly, he couldn't expect anything about this vigilante anymore. Deku seemed to strive to live in the shadows, never wanting to be in that spotlight. He drew further into his own shell, not reaching out to Shota, not that he ever really did. On a rather cold night, Shota came across Deku. He was on a rooftop staring over the skyline. Channeling your inner hero? Shota asked, still a good distance away from the Vigilante. Shota discovered he had to alert Deku of his presence as soon as possible, giving him as much time as possible to run away if he didn't want to talk. Deku didn't move, meaning he was up for a conversation. I'm not much of a hero, Deku remarked with a slight chuckle. You know, the whole illegal crime fighting gig? I dunno, if you put your hands on your hips and smile, who knows? Someone might call you All Might Jr. or something. Deku flinched at the words. Shota took note. Fact 27 about conversation with Deku, don't bring up All Might. Deku laughed a little cruelly. I don't want to be All Might. If I did, I would have gotten my hero license. He stepped down from the ledge to face Shota. I have a lead. Shota nodded. It's, not really hero work. I'm not going to do anything illegal. Deku shook his head quickly. No, it's not illegal or anything, but there's this family. They have 3 kids. He shifted nervously and shuffled his feet, a nervous habit Shota noticed the boy man had. Their dad's a bad person. He whispered quietly. Shota suddenly realized what Deku was asking. You want me to get the kids out? Yes, please, they need it. It's bad. Eraserhead. He seemed to be working himself up to say something else. He, had 4 kids before. Shota froze and an icy chill worked his way through his body. Do you have any proof? Deku shook his head. But they tell me how he beats them. How he beat their older sister till she couldn't even breathe. I can't do anything without proof. I can't have someone monitor them or anything. I need something. Deku, you got to have something. Isn't it enough for speculation? If someone suspects these kids are being hurt, they should be saved. Now he was yelling, great, just what Shota wanted. You are a hero. So save people. Don't stand on your high horse and pretend you're better than the rest of us. I want to help, but I only have so much power. Deku sighed. Whatever. The family name is Hiota. The kids are Dai, Yuta and Nozomi. Just do whatever your hero license lets you. The last part of his sentence was cold and mocking Shota. With that, Deku was gone. Grappling across buildings. Shota rubbed his forehead a few times. Just wait. He muttered to himself. Then the stray will come, be patient. Hiota, gotta find them. He made his way off the rooftop and was on his way. Shota spent the next week or so looking for anything that could bring the kids to safety. Some screwed-up rules meant that someone within the family had to say something. Or someone who lived close by. They could remove the kids temporarily, but if there was no proof of abuse or anything, then the kids would just go straight back home. Ever since his argument with Deku, he hadn't seen him. The guy was purposefully taking routes that Shota wasn't on. This was great news for Night Eye. Apparently his interns now ran into the Vigilante on the daily and they were scouting him. For now all Shota could do was attempt to get the kids free. He suspected until then Deku would still be angry, and he had every right to be angry. It was infuriating to him that these kids could get beat up and Shota couldn't do anything. Alas, no matter how hard he dug or neighbors he spoke to, nothing came of his efforts. So he spent weeks in the silent treatment from the boy Vigilante. This silence came to an abrupt end. Shota had stumbled into an alleyway, only to find 5 slumped figures. They were tied up, Deku's work. He hadn't even been able to see Deku's handiwork in weeks. Even though he heard about the Vigilante from lots of people, it always felt best to see his work. The confirmation with Shota's own eyes that the Vigilante was still doing all right. As he gathered the first 3 with his capture weapon, he froze. The ground was wet with small splatters of liquid. It was a relatively clear evening. There was no rain, meaning it was blood. He quickly checked over the 3 criminals he had in his grasp. They had nothing more than a few bruises. The remaining 2 criminals were a few feet further. Shota crouched beside the nearest one. He was also fine. Meaning the blood had to be coming from the last guy. Shota checked the last man over. No blood. Now Shota was really worried. There was no way Deku was injured. He'd never had more than a few bumps and scrapes after any fight. Shota knew Deku would be on the rooftops if he wasn't in the alley. The criminals would just have to wait. He had to save the kid Vigilante. Once he was on a rooftop, he could see it in the moonlight. A figure in the shadows, and sure enough a red trail leading straight to it. Shota raced to the boy. Once he reached the body, he turned Deku over. Shota tried to steady his breathing. Now wasn't the time to freak out. As he checked over the boy's abdomen, he breathed a sigh of relief. No wound there. Then he saw it, or rather its multiple stab wounds in his right leg. Shota didn't want to think about how he got them. Deku? Can you hear me? He wrapped his capture weapon around the wounds he needed to stop the bleeding. The boy appeared to be passed out from blood loss, but he might still be awake. I'm going to get you to a hospital, okay? It's Eraserhead, you're safe now. The boy's eyes seemed to move beneath his eyelids. As Shota picked him up in bridal style, they opened fully. His eyes, still a piercing green, were foggy. No, he whispered so quietly if Shota hadn't been carrying him there was no way he would have heard it. You're injured, I'm gonna help you. Deku just shook his head feebly. No. He put his hands against Shota's chest and tried to push him away. Hospital. See, can't. You're bleeding out, just hold on. Deku kept his weak struggles in an attempt to free himself. Suddenly a thought came crashing down on Shota. He couldn't break Deku's trust. He wasn't even sure if Deku trusted him. Regardless, he needed Deku to trust him. He looked down to the covered wounds once more. Hisashi knew first aid, he could do stitches. Deku could probably be treated at his place. If it was really bad, Recovery Girl was in his contacts. Okay, you can stop fighting me. No hospitals. I'll take you back to my place. Deku looked like he was going to put up a further fight, but instead went limp in Shota's arms. He wasn't unconscious, just too tired to move anywhere. The trip back to his apartment was far too long. Every time Deku's limp head hit his chest, Shota thought he was unconscious, or even dead. When he came inside, Shota rushed into the living room, placing the boy onto the hardwood floors. Hisashi! He called, Hisashi! The blonde came out of their bedroom stumbling. Shota! Then more urgently. Shota! What the hell? He was stabbed a few times. Shota glanced down at the boy. I think he fell asleep or he's unconscious. But he hasn't been passed out for long, I don't think. He was awake when I found him, or I mean he woke up. Hisashi rushed to Deku's side. Get the first aid kit. Why is just one night of sleep so hard? He began to unwind the capture weapon as Shota retreated to the kitchen for the first aid kit. When he returned, Hizashi was in the process of removing the black clothing as best he could. Shota wordlessly handed over the kit and watched as Hizashi did whatever medical thing he knew to help Deku. Soon enough he'd been stitched and bandaged. Hizashi leaned back with a long sigh of relief. "Goodness, Sho. You never fail to surprise me." Deku's face was still a little pale for Shota liking. His mask, which still covered half of his face, was still on. Hizashi seemed to notice where Shota's eyes were looking. "Bet he'll take it off for us soon. You just gotta wait, he's a stray, remember?" "Not a cat," was all Shota was in the mood to reply with. He picked the boy up. Shota had noticed it earlier, but it was painfully obvious now. He was incredibly light. Shota laid him on the couch and rearranged his limbs so it looked somewhat comfortable. He'd laid a blanket over the young vigilante before making his way into the kitchen. "I'll stay here with him, just in case he wakes up and freaks out because he doesn't know where he is. You should get some sleep in a bed for once, you know. He won't know what happened to him when he wakes up. What if he thinks he was kidnapped? Leave a note." Shota just shook his head and sat on the couch parallel to the one Deku rested on. Hizashi didn't argue it any further. Just gave Shota a light kiss on the head before going back into their room. Shota wouldn't have minded the company, but Hizashi hadn't gotten a good sleep in a while. He needed the rest. A few hours passed, maybe more. Shota wasn't fully sure if he was awake for all of it. About an hour before the sun would rise, Deku shifted a few times. He slowly sat up, clearly in pain. He began to scan the room. Finally his eyesight met Shota's. "You can relax, I'm not hurting you. You got stabbed and I took you back to my place to get you patched up. You're free to leave whenever." He got a slow, hesitant nod in return. Deku slowly stood. The moment he put weight on his right leg he winced. Then slowly lowered himself back into the cushions. Something seemed to click in his head and he reached his hand up to his mask. "We didn't take it off. Your identity is safe. Want some food?" Deku nodded. Shota walked into the kitchen. "What do you feed people recovering from blood loss?" "Something healthy." Shota grabbed a banana and some vanilla yogurt. He walked back into the living room. Once he'd set the food down on the coffee table, they both seemed to have a realization. Delu couldn't eat with his mask on. I can go while you, Shota said rather awkwardly and made a move to stand. "It's fine," Deku rasped out. "I don't want to owe you anything for helping me." Then he reached a trembling hand to his mask. He took it off gradually, head facing downward. "You don't owe me anything. I don't want to be in debt to anyone. You let me stay the night and gave me medical attention. That means you can see my face, right?" This was not how Shota wanted to learn Deku's identity. "Stop," Shota said firmly, shutting his eyes. "You don't owe me anything. I would have done the same thing no matter who it was bleeding out. Just don't get stabbed anymore and we are even." There were a few minutes of silence as Shota sat with his eyes shut. "Okay," he whispered, "you can open your eyes. My mask is on again." Shota did and was taken back to see tears gathering in the green eyes. Deku wiped them away furiously once he was aware of their presence. "I'm going to go into my bedroom," Shota said. "You can eat and leave or stay. The choice is yours." Deku nodded once again. After 10 minutes, Shota could hear the living room window creak open. He sighed. He wanted the kid to stay a little longer. He was still injured. Shota walked back out into the living room. Sure enough, Deku was gone. Only evidence he'd been there was the blanket draped on his couch. Shota marched into the kitchen to pour himself a cup of coffee when he saw it. A yellow sticky note on his fridge. It just had 2 simple words written on it. "Thank you, chapter text." They never brought it up again, or even mentioned it again. Deku didn't completely change or suddenly become more trusting. Instead he did change his patrol routes to his original. Meaning Shota was back picking up Deku's leftovers, not that he minded. Since the stabbing there's been a few more joint raids Deku participated in. He quickly became a favorite of the few police officers who worked with them. In the beginning most of them stayed quiet because they were rookies and the heroes told them to stay quiet about him. Now they were asking for Deku's input on cases all the time. He was very smart. Shota wasn't sure if it was a good or bad thing. Deku reminded him of Nizu. It was after Deku's usual quirk analysis when an officer pointed it out. Do you think that's his quirk? The vigilante had left the room a few moments before. You just know other people's quirks? Or like an intelligence enhancer? 'Cause he's better than our head analyst Yamamoto. I thought he was really good until Deku showed up. Do you know his quirk Eraserhead? No, Deku is a very private person. The officer laughed. Really? I've known the guy for almost a month now. He never talks to me unless he has to. But I am a cop, so he must be a little scared of me. That was how Shota had posted on the forum of his speculation about Deku's quirk. They had two main other theories on it, one an speed boost or a stealth quirk. There was a healing quirk, but that had been ruled out due to recent events. Nizu actually agreed with Shota, which is why it quickly became their most likely theory. Over the months Deku had been around, they had developed a few theories about the vigilante's life. 1. Deku was poor or from the slums. That was why he strictly patrolled in those areas. 2. He was in his mid to late 20s. Deku wasn't very tall, but he was very strong. He was also too smart to be any younger. 3. He lived alone. There was no way the vigilante had a lover. For he probably worked a job at a credit company. It was Hizashi who said he could imagine the vigilante just answering customer service calls all day. Now 5. He had an intelligence or analysis quirk. Frankly, everything was just speculation, but it was fun building a life for the vigilante. It was one night on patrol when Shota heard Deku's stomach grumble lightly. Deku laughed it off awkwardly, insisting he just hadn't eaten dinner. It was that which reminded him of the way Deku weighed far too little for someone in their 20s. So Shota began stashing food through Deku's patrol routes. He left it on rooftops, wrapped up and hopefully hidden. He had a pretty good idea of Deku's patrol timing. Deku ran on a very strict patrol schedule, meaning Deku would cross over certain rooftops every night within the range of an hour or two. Shota tried to leave the food as close to the vigilante's drop-off time as he could. He usually just left a sandwich or two. To be perfectly honest, anyone could have been taking the food, but Shota hoped that the stray vigilante would be the one eating it. It wasn't till his third week of leaving food around till Deku addressed it. You're the one leaving food on rooftops. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? You're skinny. I can take care of myself. I don't want to owe you anything. You don't owe me. Shota sighed. What was with Deku? He understood why Deku didn't want to be in debt about his injury. Nonetheless, a sandwich every now and again was very different from a stab wound. Why didn't he just accept the help? You said that last time. Is it so crazy to believe that I want to help you? You seem a little on the skinny side. It doesn't hurt to leave you some food every now and then. Some people need it more than me. Why don't you go give your sandwiches to orphanages or homeless shelters? I don't want your charity. Shota, for what must have been the millionth time, was taken back by the vigilante. Wasn't it obvious why Shota wanted to help him? I want to help you. Heroes are supposed to help everyone. You're a part of everyone. Just don't waste your time or money on me, it's not worth it. I disagree, it's not a waste. I don't want to find you passed out on rooftops anymore. Giving you some food isn't a waste, it's keeping you alive. Why do you care? Why do you care if I'm bleeding out? I'm not better than the criminals you put in jail. I break the law every goddamn day? So what makes me so different? Despite the words he spoke, Deku's voice was soft. I don't know. Shota surprised himself. I don't know why I worry about you so much. I don't know why I don't like the idea of you fighting criminals alone and getting injured. I don't know why I care, I just do. Deku moved backwards a few steps. Look, kid. Not a kid. He mumbled in return. If you're younger than me, you're a kid. That's not important right now. You're not a villain, you help people. You may not have a license that legally allows you to fight crime, but you still do. And you're good at it. When you first came on the scene, everyone was talking about you. Heck, they still are, because you're the mystery vigilante. You don't scream across rooftops about why you fight crime or how unfair the world is. You don't usually take on any more than you know you can handle. You're quick, smart, stealthy, and you've got some crazy analysis quirk. I don't like seeing good people get hurt, So that's why I didn't take you to a hospital that night. That's why nobody is telling the police where to find you. You're doing a good job and you shouldn't be punished for it. So if you seem like you're hungry, yes, I'll leave some food so you don't starve. Deku whispered out into the wind. Shota couldn't pick up on the words. He heard the next two, however, loud and clear. Of course. With that, Deku was gone, disappearing into the night. Shota watched as he left, and not for the first time he was confused. What did he say? He didn't bring up any of his own personal information, or All Might, or his quirk, or the Hero Commission, or Deku's identity, or his curiosity for the vigilante home life or place to sleep. Where did he go wrong? Did he say something that triggered the boy? Was there something else he needed to add to the list? Man, trying to get close to Deku was too complicated. He had too many walls and too many reasons to get angry. Maybe Shota should have let the vigilante tell him his name that morning. Maybe this whole thing would be a lot easier to understand. He made his way home. Hisashi could pick up on Shota's frustration. Your stray getaway again? He's not Dash. Shota stopped grumbling. It wasn't like Hisashi was going to stop his dumb analogy now. I just don't get it. I've done nothing wrong. I let him leave when he doesn't want to talk. I got him help because he was injured. I've also been leaving him food. What else do I have to do? Shota slumped against the couch. So why did he freak out this time? He didn't like that I cared if he died or not. Hisashi chuckled lightly. What, so he yelled at you for caring about him? No, it's more like he doesn't want me to care. And if I do care, he doesn't know why I would bother with him. So when I tried to explain I don't like the idea of him dead on the floor, he got upset. He didn't yell, just sulked for a moment, then left. Did you mention All Might? He really doesn't like the guy. No. I didn't ask him for anything personal at all. I must have just overstepped. I wish his quirk analysis worked on people's emotions instead of just quirks. Shota mumbled. Then maybe we could make sense of this whole back and forth thing that's going on. Did he ever actually tell you his quirk? Or are we still in the guessing stage? What? No, he didn't tell me his quirk, but I was thinking it's similar to the women we met at the police office in that trafficking case. What was her name again? Tanaka? Maybe the two of them are related. Who knows? Look, you've known Deku for over a year now. It's obvious he has some major trust issues. If a 20-year-old spends his spare time beating up criminals, there is some trauma involved. So you're dealing with a 20-year-old kid who doesn't want to trust anyone and has some trauma. Maybe you should try something else. Like what? Ignore him till he gets lonely? I'm not sure, but he's too hesitant to take baby steps like we did with Charlie here. Take like minuscule steps. I've literally been doing that for months. You're the one who told me to take it slow. Don't worry, the stray will come soon. Guess what? I say something wrong almost every time we talk. He's always getting mad and running away from me. It's so annoying. I feel like just giving up. Shota stood to look out the window. I just want to help him. It's kinda odd, but he reminds me of Shinso. Shota laughed at the thought of the purple-haired teen. He started at UA in the general course after utterly defeating the hero course in the sports festival. He'd been admitted to the hero course. It took forever for him to make friends, and even then he was reluctant. Finally, now that they were heading into their second year, Shinso was comfortable around the class. Speaking of Shinso, he was really cautious because of his quirk, right? Hisashi didn't even need to prompt Shota any further. So Deku doesn't like talking about his quirk? Is that why he got so mad at me? Hisashi shrugged. It's all I can think of unless you never mentioned his quirk. Shota very well could have muttered about Deku's quirk speculation. At least now he had a theory as to why the vigilante got mad at him. Again. It was only 2 days later when Deku approached him, which was a first. He sounded exhausted. I don't want to fight with you. It's weird changing up my patrol routes just to avoid you. Okay. Shota said rather simply. Are you gonna tell me why you've been avoiding me? You said I have a good quirk. I don't know what you were. Look, Deku. I understand you have a boatload of things you won't ever tell me. I understand that you want to stay hidden behind that mask, but people can still care about you. I don't give a DMN about your quirk. I'm not going to sell you out. If I was, it would have been long ago. Is your quirk cool? Yes, But I really don't care and I can't keep guessing what is going to make you run away anymore. You don't want to fight with me anymore? Then trust me. He watched as the green eyes contemplated. The longer Deku stayed quiet, the more he regretted what he said. Trust you? I don't know. I haven't really. See, the thing is Shota gave a sigh. It's fine, kid, just forget it. Let's just pretend I didn't say anything. Shota turned to leave and he had a patrol to get to. I'm sorry. Deku called out to him. I don't want to trust you. I don't want you to randomly get bored. I don't want to rely on you because then it will be harder when you leave. Shota smiled at the vigilante. He was obviously terrified, but it was probably the first real breakthrough. The first time Deku had openly talked about his feelings with Shota. You don't have to tell me your whole life story. You don't have to trust me right away. Just do what you're comfortable with. Perhaps knowing something about you would be nice, like how to make sure you don't ditch me all the time. Shota spoke the words lightly, making obvious Deku didn't really have to answer. I don't have an analysis quirk. So then is it stealth? Deku shuffled nervously, contemplating. I don't have one. Deku titled his head, studying Shota's reaction. You're quirkless? The boy flinched slightly at his words. Yes, always have been. Is that why you don't like heroes? I don't like society in general. Every profession is heavily quirk-based. If I graduated top in medical school, I'd still get overlooked for someone with a healing quirk. Our society is based around something I don't even have. Is that why you became a vigilante? You wanted to prove you could be stronger than people with quirks. I'd always wanted to be a hero ever since I was a little kid. I just wanted to save people even if I had to do illegal means to do so. It felt like Deku was skipping a few steps that happened, but Shota just relished in this information. That's why I thought your movements were incredibly similar to my own. I fight practically quirkless. Aren't you going to say something else? Is there something you want me to say? How I shouldn't be doing this? I'll just end up getting hurt or being in the way. Shota gave Deku a look. Are you joking with me? I've worked with you on many cases for months now. I've seen you fight. You don't have a handicap because you're quirkless. I'd have to be an idiot to tell you to stop now. You've already proved yourself and you wouldn't listen to me anyway. Deku laughed. I never did listen to people. They told me to be a police officer, that way I can still be a hero. Well, you're a hero now, even if only a few drunken idiots and criminals that know what you've done. Deku's eyes crinkled. Shota could almost picture what the boy's face would look like right now, a small but warm smile. Deku didn't say anything and the two studied the people who walked along the road. Suddenly there was a low grumble. The source, Deku's stomach. I really don't mean to be rude, but I'm kinda hungry. Shota chuckled and nodded across the street. Above the pharmacy is a sandwich or two. Deku nodded his head and made his way to the ledge. Hey, Eraserhead, he called, swiveling his head backwards. You're a pretty cool partner. And with that the boy was gone, swinging towards his meal. Shota let out a long sigh of relief. Honestly, this stupid kid had his head running in circles. Now he could only hope this was a real step in the right direction. It's then when he gets the call, he doesn't bother checking the caller ID. Aizawa speaking. Sensei? Shota didn't even need to hear much more to know who was speaking. He had a problem to deal with. Yes, Kaminari? Bakugo got a little angry at Mineta. Shota tried not to roll his eyes. Is anyone hospitalized? No, but the door is kinda gone. Which door? Mineta's. A long pause. No, I was going to tell him about that too. Kaminari spoke to someone Shota could assume would be Kirishima. Oh, and the living room is like destroyed. So, bye sensei. He hung up before Shota could interrogate him anymore. God damn it, Bakugo. He should meet Deku. Maybe it will humble his hot head for once when he's beat by someone who is quirkless. You look dead. Deku remarked as Shota came to join him on their rooftop. Shota side-eyed the vigilante. Deku's eyes crinkled. Meaning the kid was smiling at Shota's exhaustion. Glad to see this is a source of amusement for you. You couldn't really blame him for being exhausted. For some reason Nizu had thought, given the experiences Class 1A had been through, they needed a sense of normalcy. Resulting in Shota now their homeroom teacher for 2 just when he thought he was leaving the kids. He was 100% certain Nizu was simply doing this for his own enjoyment. Shota would get to watch them grow closer than he usually did, so he supposed he could put them with the kids in the time being. You okay though? If you pass out, I'm not taking you to a hospital. Deku was smirking under that mask. Shota knew he was smirking. You try keeping a bunch of 16-year-olds under control. Deku coughed awkwardly. That was another thing Shota noticed. Deku didn't hate when he spoke about UA or his class, but he was certainly uncomfortable. Teenagers really do SCK. Deku declared, making his way to the ledge. Well then, Eraserhead, I'll be off now. I've got some villains to go beat up. Shota watched the Vigilante's back as he moved further away. It was comical how much the Vigilante changed in the span of a week. Conversations were always one-sided and felt very forced. Deku still didn't reveal any personal information and was wary about a lot of things, but his Quirkless reveal changed him. He now seemed more comfortable in general. Hisashi had even commented on how Shota seems more pleased after patrol than usual. For all the unpredictability Deku had, he was rather cliché. Opening slowly and only starting to trust when his biggest secret was revealed. If only Shota could somehow convince the boy about becoming a hero. Whenever he brought up the subject, Deku shut down. Sometimes ditching him, other times just remaining quiet. There was still something off about the Vigilante though. Shota had only noticed after Deku opened up to him more. He never went home in the same way. At first Shota thought it would be to throw people off, but he went home through different parts of the city. One day he'd head east, the next he'd be going north, then going towards the factory districts. It never ended. He knew Deku was a cautious person, but that was a little too cautious. He'd waste hours of his time just circling around till he was home. Shota knew the Vigilante wasn't continuing his patrol, so why bother wasting so much time? After watching the Vigilante depart in yet another odd direction, Shota remembered the winter. The Vigilante's hours were greatly reduced. Shota thought it was because nobody likes working in the cold. Deku wasn't getting paid, so it made sense for him to stay inside more. What if there was no home? He knew it was a bit of a stretch. Just because the kid went in a million different directions, or could never answer which part of the city he was in, or ever mentioned his living conditions in general, doesn't mean he was homeless. He's not probably homeless. Was Hisashi only response to Shota's theory? Do you really think so? Yes. Hisashi was reading through the newest hero news. Are you even listening? Yes, honestly, how would you even manage Deku without me? Turning to me for every little problem and theory. Hisashi said rather fondly, I'm sure the forum would love to have their say about our resident vigilante's living conditions. No, Deku wouldn't want all his information spread around. Or does Shota not want to share? Hisashi's voice was giddy. He was enjoying this far too much. Shut up, Deku's secrets aren't mine to share. Okay then. Regardless though, you said the boy never goes home in the same direction. He could just be careful. It took him a year to tell you he didn't have a quirk. That's different. It just feels off. Well, he's only in his 20s, what if he is still living with his mom and dad? Doesn't want them to get mixed up in his nightly job. What about the whole winter thing? He was barely around and never had proper winter gear. Like you said, nobody wants to work in the cold. Shota, I think you're trying to rescue Deku from something that doesn't exist. What rescue? Why would I be rescuing him? What were you going to do if he was homeless? I thought he could spend a few nights here? In our guest room? Hisashi finished Shota's sentence for him. I'm not against having a roommate, but not everyone needs rescuing all the time. He's probably living his life just fine, Shota. Shota nodded disappointedly. Wait, disappointed? Why was he disappointed the vigilante wasn't homeless? It's a good thing that Deku wasn't on the streets. Deku held an arm out to brace himself on the alley wall. Were you hit? Shota asked worriedly. Deku waved him off and retracted his arm from the wall. I just got dizzy. Shota took in the vigilante's state. He was slumped, had a hand resting over his stomach, his eyes seemed unfocused. Much like Kaminari whenever someone was lecturing and he got lost. Deku seemed to compose himself and made a move to grapple upwards. Shota reached out to grab his arm. For once it's not me who is dead on my feet. Shota tried to joke, but the worry slipped into his voice. You should go home and get some rest. For a brief moment Shota could see an emotion, longing perhaps, flash into Deku's eyes. Not people need saving. Shota knew Deku was stubborn, but he shouldn't fight if he was tired. You're gonna get stabbed again. Not everyone is as nice as me and will patch you up. Shota didn't need to tell Deku there were very few heroes who wouldn't help the kid. He had the entire underground hero community, a few agencies, and even some of the UA staff around his finger. Deku didn't need to know that. I'll be fine, I just need a minute. Shota nodded his head. Okay, and after that minute you go home. Deku shook his head. Deku, don't be stupid, you're not an idiot. You shouldn't patrol if you can't do your best, your dash. Quirkless. Deku cut in, his voice bitter. Shota let out a long breath. He knew Quirkless discrimination was bad, but did it have Deku doubting anybody's help? Even people who had given him food and stopped the idiot from passing out from blood loss. No, but you're a vigilante, and I don't think I need to remind you that vigilantism is illegal. Meaning you will go to prison. Instead of ending up behind bars, go home. Shota knew he got the boy thinking. Deku wasn't an idiot, even he knew it would be best to go home. Can't. Can't or won't. Can't. A bunch of worst-case scenarios came flying through Shota's head. Why not? I was kicked out. Shota raised an eyebrow. You were. He was resisting the urge to roll his eyes. Deku was ridiculously stubborn. Yup. Deku sounded unsure of himself. He pitched slightly to the left before straightening up again. I'll be allowed back home in the morning. I'm supposed to be at a friend's but went out on a patrol instead. Weak laughter from the green-haired boy. Whoops, probably should have gone to my friend's. You're not staying out here. Deku made a few protests. I don't care if your landlord will kill you for going back home. Go home and come back tomorrow. Deku shook his head once more. Something Hizashi said earlier came back to Shota. I'm not against having a roommate. Surely it would be for one night. Then the kid could go back to his home wherever the hell it was. The kid was probably just making more excuses to stay on patrol longer anyway. Come to my place. Deku's eyes widened. No thank you, Racerhead. I'm like honored and all, but really dash. Deku swayed even further to the right. He didn't straighten himself quick enough and stumbled forwards. Shota gave Deku a look. He grabbed the vigilante by his waist. Come on, staying somewhere for one night won't kill you. Deku protested the entire way back, but he complied nonetheless. He was very antsy once he was inside. You can take our guest room. No, I won't unmask you. You can grab food in the fridge. The window is open and you're free to leave in the morning. For both our sakes, wait till morning when you've actually slept some before leaving. Deku gave a sheepish nod and made his way to the room. Shota knew the boy, he probably wouldn't fall asleep for a few hours. He'd be too nervous in the new environment. By the way, I have a roommate. Deku instantly stiffened at those words. Present, Mike, he's my roommate. Deku's head tilted and he looked like he wanted to ask a million questions. The first one being why there were only 3 doors in his apartment. One Deku knew was the bathroom, meaning it was a 2-bedroom apartment. Meaning present Mike and Shota would be in the same room. Shota simply gestured to the guest room door and Deku entered. Once Shota himself was in bed, he stared at the ceiling. Perhaps soon Deku would reveal his identity. He'd probably never get the kid to be a legal hero, but maybe they could meet in the middle. Shota closed his eyes with a content smile. He was being shaken awake. Shota didn't want to wake up and simply grumbled in return. Shota, wake up. Someone's broken into the house. Shota rose quickly, quickly for him. Hizashi was upright, scanning the room slowly. Once he'd confirmed Shota was awake, he walked to the door. Who broke in? There was a loud crash from the guest room. Someone probably went in the window. For a brief moment Shota forgot about their temporary guest. It all came rushing back to him. It's not an intruder, it's Deku. Hizashi stopped and turned to stare at Shota. Deku? You brought Deku home with you? Shota nodded. He probably should have remembered to tell Hizashi. He wasn't fit to patrol and refused to go home. I brought him here. Hizashi rubbed a hand over his eyes. You go check on what he's doing at 4 in the morning. Shota nodded and entered Deku's room. The table lamp was turned on. Shota could see the sheets in a disaster. He walked to the other side of the bed to find Deku, sprawled out on the floor. "Did you really fall off the bed?" Shota asked the sleeping boy. A low groan and mumbles came from the body, maybe not sleeping. He rolled the kid over without even thinking twice about it. The moment he did, he regretted it. He saw Deku's face grimaced in pain. He saw Deku's face, maskless. Before he had time to look at him more clearly, Deku groaned again. Shota perked him upwards, the vigilante limp in his grasp. "Deku, what's wrong?" He wasn't injured when he went to bed. Then Shota took note of the beet-red face and the drops of sweat on his brow. He reached out a hand to Deku's forehead. Sure enough, he was burning. Water." The voice was quiet and Shota barely heard it. "Water?" The raspy voice asked again. Shota gave a nod. Why on earth did Deku patrol if he was sick? He laid the boy back onto the bed and left the room. Hisashi was waiting outside the door. "He's sick." Hisashi immediately went to the kitchen, calling backwards to Shota. "I'll get the medicine, thermometer, and whatever else. Grab some water." Shota returned into the room. Deku still trying to sit up, Shota laid the boy down again. "Water's on the way, just lay back down. You don't need to get up." Deku in his sick state didn't argue. Now Shota could truly see the boy. He really was a boy, his face was skinny, his cheekbones very pronounced. The vigilante was not in his 20s. Unless he had a baby face, Deku didn't look any older than 14. Which was impossible, surely it was impossible. There was no way Shota had been working with a 14-year-old vigilante. He was so small, he was just a kid. Why was a vigilante? He should be in school making friends, going out on dates. Hisashi came back to the room. He froze upon seeing Deku's face. Hisashi wordlessly handed over the cup of water. Shota raised the boy's upper body and told him to drink. Deku drank the water greedily. Slowly now. Deku slowed in the slightest, still desperate for the water. The kid, he really was a kid, was exhausted. His bones limp, effort drained from him. Shota gently laid him back on the bed. He stood next to the boy. Hisashi kept staring in awe at the vigilante's young face. Shota moved away to grab the washcloth. Hisashi placed on the night table. "No," a weak insistence from the sick boy. "Don't go, don't leave me." Shota might have laughed if he wasn't worried about him. Deku finally was seeking out his company after spending a year trying not to get close to him. Hisashi passed the cloth over and laid it across Deku's forehead. He whined slightly in the cold. "Don't make me leave." Deku whispered to Shota when he shifted. "I'm not going to leave, or kick you out. You're safe, Deku." For whatever reason the boy stiffened at the name. He tugged ever so lightly on Shota's nightshirt, attempting to pull him downwards. Hisashi stifled a giggle as Shota compiled. Then Hisashi became more serious. He's so small." "I know. A kid shouldn't be getting stabbed." Shota could tell Hisashi was thinking of stitching up the boy's leg. "He's probably still in middle school, maybe high school. We do something. What if he's homeless like you though? He can't be out on the streets? You said he was starved, that's why you gave him food. What if he's being abused? Or in the system? I don't know. He doesn't like a teenager when he talks. He sounds like an adult. He's probably used to taking care of himself. No wonder he reminded me of my class. He could probably be in that class." Deku mumbled in his sleep. "Do you think he'll be mad? I told him we wouldn't unmask him. He was sick and you helped him. There's nothing we could have done. Besides, I don't know who he is. If he really is mad, all we have to do is promise not to search for him in public records. But we need to do something. At least confirm he's safe if we can't stop him from being a vigilante. Right?" Shota nodded in agreement. "I guess we'll have to wait till morning, see if he talks." Hisashi left the room and he came back a few minutes later dragging in an armchair. "Night," he whispered as he laid back as best he could on the chair. Shota closed his eyes. He could still feel the heat radiating off of Deku. They'd have to give him some medicine in the morning. Shota closed his eyes for the second time that night. Hisashi woke first to no one's surprise. He woke Shota with a few shakes. In case Deku woke lucid, it would probably be better for him to be alone in the bed. Shota switched spots with Hizashi as the blonde went to make breakfast. There was only so much time before he had to leave. He wanted Deku to wake up before then. Deku did wake up, still groggy from his sleep. Something smells good. Hizashi was making pancakes and the smell had traveled into the room. I feel hot. He mumbled. You were sick and went on patrol. Do you know how dangerous that is? Deku reached a hand to his own forehead. As he dragged his hand along his face, he noticed the absence of the mask. His eyes expanded to the size of saucers and he scrambled out of bed. You took my mask off. You promised you wouldn't. The accusatory tone hurt. The boy stumbled through the room in attempts to find his gear. You took it off to sleep and ended up falling off the bed. You were probably trying to get water. When I came in to see what was wrong, the mask was already off. Deku processed this information slowly. I don't know who you are. If you want, I won't look for you either. I do have some questions. Deku contemplated, then recognition came across his face slowly. His face blushed an even deeper red than it was. I remember. Shota sighed in relief. He really didn't want Deku to accuse him of lying. Sorry about that. He awkwardly looked at the bed. Deku had stopped moving around the room. The exhaustion seemed to hit him, and he made his way to the bed. He flopped downward on it, breathing heavily. Shota grabbed the fever medicine and gave it to the boy. Do you need water for your pills? Deku shook his head and he took the pill dry. Can I ask you some questions? Shota asked warily. He knew Deku must be scared out of his mind. The only reason the boy hadn't left was because he was sick. No doubt the fever was clouding his mind still. It's easier if I tell you a few things. You sure? I don't trust you, Deku said, staring out the window, refusing to meet Shota's eyes. But I know you won't hurt me or do anything if I tell you a few things. You never told anyone I was quirkless. Sometimes if I run into other heroes, they ask me about my quirk. If you didn't tell them, then you won't tell them what I'm about to tell you. Right? Shota's mind instantly went to Hizashi. He glanced at the door. Did you tell anyone I was quirkless? Yes. Shota admitted. It would only do him harm to lie to the boy. I said dash. With television perfect timing, Hizashi walked in. He observed the situation. I made pancakes. Deku's eyes left the window to stare at Hizashi. He had a look of awe on his face looking at the hero, making him look far too young. You told him? Deku asked and Shota nodded his head. How long have you guys been married? Hizashi choked on air. Almost 5 years. Shota supplied the answer. Deku didn't look shocked at the information. I don't trust him, but he kept the secret, right? Shota gave a nod. I bet you've told him everything, right? Another nod. Shota tried to study the boy. Much like how Deku studied everyone else. He didn't seem to be angry. He's seen my face, so I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. Deku whispered something to himself, but Shota picked up on it. I'm just too tired for this. Then Deku took a deep breath. Just don't tell anyone. His voice cracked lightly at the end, once more hitting Shota like a sledgehammer at how young the boy was. My name is Midoriya Izuku. Shota stares at Deku. Wait, no, not Deku. He's Midoriya now, Izuku Midoriya. There's a dreadfully long pause. Nobody moves, nobody speaks. As per usual, it's Hizashi who breaks the silence. Kid, how old are you? Deku Midoriya goes bright red, clearly flustered. 16. There's an audible gasp from Hizashi. Do you want to tell us anything else, or? Shota asked slowly. Midoriya gave a weak smile. There's no point not telling you. If you know my name, you can get access to my records. A deep breath from which of the three people? Shota isn't sure. You already know I'm quirkless. I was diagnosed when I was 4. I've got this toe joint. That's who they prove it. I really wanted to be a hero as a kid, like I desperately wanted to be a hero. I thought somehow I could be one, do something, change things. A wet laugh. I stopped dreaming about being a hero a while ago, obviously. Another pause. Neither adult tried to push the boy. It was his story to tell. My mom died. Shota isages in a breath. How old were you? 2nd year of middle school. I was 13. Deku raised a hand behind his head and ruffled the green locks. His eyes were glassy and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down several times. What happened? Shota asked as gently as he could. He didn't want to think of a 13-year-old boy sobbing over his mother's corpse. Or think of the horrors that could have plagued Deku afterwards. Villain attack. It always hurt Shota to hear those words. As a hero himself, to see what happens when you don't save everyone and get to see what remains. It's almost worse than seeing the people you couldn't save. Well, it wasn't really a villain. She was grocery shopping. I wanted to eat katsu katsudon. A few lone tears trickled down the boy's cheeks. Shota can tell Midoriya is holding back his emotions. She went to buy the ingredients we didn't have. A villain attack ended up being outside the store. Deku Midoriya reached to his face, wiping the tears which were now freely falling. The hero did some public damage. Shota could feel the blood rushing out of his face. Some debris fell on her. She was declared brain dead a few days after she was brought to the hospital. Both men knew what the boy was implying. Midoriya had to pull the plug on his own mother. Maybe he didn't make the decision himself, but he no doubt witnessed it. It's okay, you can cry. We can wait for the rest. Hizashi comforts the silently sobbing child. Hizashi moves to the bed and after a nod from Midoriya wraps his arm around the kid's shoulders. They wait for several minutes listening to Midoriya snuffle his tears and cry into Hizashi's chest. I was put in the system and things got kinda bad. They kept me in my school district so I didn't have to transfer. The families were usually really poor and took me in for the monthly payment. Midoriya had lifted his head and stared at the rather disgusted looks from Shota and Hizashi. But it wasn't their fault. He tried to insist, still crying softly. They really tried their best and had their own kids to raise, so it was okay. They didn't hit me or anything, so if I didn't get dinner every now and again it was fine. Kid, Shota breaths out, trying to release the slight anger he was feeling. It's not fine to not be fed. Midoriya tried again to assure the heroes it was all fine. Not getting dinner really wasn't a big deal. I had it worse. Tons dash. He cut himself off short, seemingly realizing what he was saying. Never mind. Anyways, so I was shuffled through the system a lot. Most families didn't want to take in a quirkless child, which makes sense, you know. Shota's frown deepened. No, it didn't make sense. Christ, how bad was Deku's self-esteem if he believed he deserved the treatment he got? So, did you start fighting crime then? Hizashi inquires. Midoriya shook his head. No, I started during my 3rd year of middle school. Another long breath and pause from the Vigilante. I met All Might. Both Shota and Hizashi instantly looked to one another. The unspoken topic was now breached. First of all, Midoriya had actually met All Might? And secondly, how hard did Shota have to punch him for whatever happened to Midoriya? You know the saying, never meet you heroes. The couple nod their heads in unison. Well, it's true. All Might saved me from a villain. I followed him up to a rooftop and asked him. I asked him if someone like me could ever be a hero. Shota respected the former number 1 hero. He was grateful to what All Might had done to keep the world safe. That didn't mean he agreed with All Might's opinions. The man was not quirkiest, but definitely not welcoming to change. He was a very traditional man and didn't seem aware of how impactful his own words were. He told me it was impossible, and deep down I knew it. I knew I could never save anyone or be useful, but it hurt. Someone I'd always looked up to telling me my dreams were impossible. I guess you could say I finally got my reality check. Afterwards I walked home and sort of accepted my fate. Midoriya nodded his head, satisfied with his story. He moved to get up. I think I should be able to stomach a few pancakes. Do you have any more fever medicine I could use? Midoriya smiled, his eyes red and watery from his constant crying. Midoriya? Hizashi said kindly. You never told us how you decided to become a vigilante. As the boy's face dropped and went rather emotionless, Hizashi backpedaled. You don't have to right now. I just wanted to remind you that we still have some questions. A nod. Can I finish after breakfast? I'm really hungry. Yes, but you shouldn't have any more fever medicine. It's best to be used in smaller amounts. Midoriya gripped the bed railing tightly and raised himself to stand. Hizashi offered an arm to the sick boy, but he shook his head. "I'm sick, not old," he muttered, in which Hizashi laughed loudly. The trio made their way into the kitchen. The pancakes had gone cold during Midoriya's conversation. Shota popped a few in the microwave. Hizashi poured the coffee and offered some to the kid. Thankfully, Midoriya declined. Shota didn't need another teen addicted to coffee. The ones he had in his class were more than enough. They settled in their kitchen table to eat. Midoriya looked uncomfortable, which wasn't a surprise. He shifted nervously in his seat, a habit which was oh so common for the boy. They each had their fill. Midoriya stopped after a singular pancake. He didn't want to upset his stomach and felt better. Hizashi and Shota gathered the plates and put them into the dishwasher. Midoriya watched with a rather fascinated face. "Never seen a dishwasher before?" Hizashi teased the teenager. Because Deku was a teenager and no, Shota wasn't over that. Midoriya's face went beet red and he stumbled through his words. "No, it's just it's been so long since I got to see this." "This?" Shota prompted. "Domesticity." Shota smiled at Midoriya once more, quelling his inner anger. Hizashi nodded at the couches in the living room. "Wanna sit?" Midoriya nodded, but Shota glanced at the clock. He was late. Hizashi was late. Why did it have to be a school day? "I want to continue where we left off, but it's almost time for school." Hizashi checked the clock and scowled when Shota proved to be right. "One of us can stay with you." Shota tried his best to give Midoriya a reassuring smile. "That's okay." Shota internally groaned. What was the chance that Midoriya would sit in an empty apartment for hours and not leave? "It's not a big deal for one of us to stay." Another shake of the head. "You guys have let me spend the night twice. I don't want you to be burdened by me anymore. For the last time, it isn't a burden dash. I'll be here." Midoriya cut Shota off. "I won't leave. I don't want you looking through my records in order to find me if I leave. So I'll stay, besides I'm still sick." "You sure you'll be okay?" Hizashi asks. Midoriya confirms that yes, he'll be fine. While it betrays every bone in Shota's body to leave Deku here, he goes. As he shuts the door, he catches words Midoriya says to what must be the wall. "Kaken will imagine he'd blast." The door finally muffles the voice of Midoriya. Who on earth was Kaken? Shota wished the day passed by normally. The kids in 1A-2A of course would never let that happen. A few screaming matches with Bakugo, mostly directed to Todoroki. The boy was still bitter that Todoroki refused to fight him at full power. Mineta successfully scored himself another week of detentions. Denki, Kirishima and Siro spent the entirety of the day, discreetly, attempting to throw paper planes at Baku. Most missed each of the papers, asking Bakugo to go shopping with them over the weekend. When the day finally ended and Shota could return home, he did so as quickly as possible. When he and Hizashi stormed in, Shota kept visioning the empty apartment. However, once they'd clambered inside, they could see Midoriya. He was sitting on the couch. The TV was playing some show Shota vaguely remembered Mina and Uraraka talking about. As Midoriya turned his head to greet them, he flashed a bright smile. He looked better, a little less pale. His eyes were still red. He'd probably cried through some of the day. "Welcome back." "Glad to be back, little listener." Hizashi met Midoriya's unenthusiasm with about twice as much, causing a small chuckle from Shota. "I won't make you wait any longer." Shota tried not to show his relief from not being kept in suspense any longer. "If that's what you want," is what he ends up saying as the pair sit on the couch across from Midoriya. More deep breaths from the teenager. For a moment Shota recalls the breathing techniques he learnt when dealing with panic attacks. It was the 4-7-8 method, in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Midoriya was using that precise technique. Okay, so it's kinda a long story. Why I decided to be a vigilante. I wasn't really happy after I stopped trying to be a hero. I got shifted to a new foster home pretty quickly after that whole All Might incident. He was the first foster father I had who hit the kids. Shota had guessed that Midoriya had been a victim of abuse. Unfortunately, he was right. He'd hit us if we broke a rule or just if he was angry. His wife and biological kids were terrified of him. He had 2 other foster children other than me. They apparently reported him once, but since his wife and biological kids denied everything, the police couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't even take away his foster license. More breathing. I was angry. I wanted him to suffer for what he'd done. He broke the law and needed to go to jail. That was the law. There shouldn't be any exceptions or get-out-free cards. Then I heard about Stain, a vigilante who went around killing off heroes. I didn't like what he was doing, but he wasn't really wrong. He shouldn't have killed people, but Midoriya paused to watch the reactions of Shota and Hisashi. Both remained fairly emotionless. I agreed with him. That's when it came to me, I could do that. Nobody was stopping me from going out and doing what I thought was right. And I wanted to save people. Is that when you became a vigilante? No, I trained first. I wanted to be able to defend myself before trying to stop crime, especially since I'm quirkless. I'm already at a disadvantage. Shota really didn't want to know how the boy trained, but he asked regardless. How did you train? There was a club. Shota didn't like where this was going. You would fight people and the winners would get money. So I entered to pick up on a few tricks. I got pretty good after I'd built up muscle. I've seen a lot of people throw punches and I know how a real punch feels, so it was easy to apply it to myself. You know what a real punch feels like? A sheepish nod from the teenager. There was also this girl, she really helped me learn to fight. She gave me lots of tips cause I was new to the game. After I could fight pretty well, I started to make my gear. Since I've always loved heroes, I had support plans already. I had to modify them for me and not KAC, but anyways I made myself gear. Then I hit the streets. Midoriya seemed far too indifferent about this all. Like he didn't care he was beat up. Like he didn't understand that he'd been done wrong. It was an odd contrast from this morning. He barely held it together talking about his mother and All Might. When he talked about his abuse and mistreatment, he didn't seem to mind. Thank you. Hisashi says, smiling once more at Midoriya. Thanks for telling us. I just have a question for you, where are you staying right now? The face paled slightly at the question. I'm not with the family I mentioned earlier. They didn't keep around because I caused a lot of trouble. Right now I'm bouncing between orphanages and group homes. Everything is really crowded, so a whole bunch of the older kids don't really have a permanent home. Shota nodded and looked over to Hisashi. They had a silent conversation with their eyes. You can stay here. Shota offers. To nobody's surprise, Midoriya shakes his head. No, really I can't thank you guys enough for what you've done. Just don't tell anyone about who I am and I'll be on my way. Midoriya. Shota says sharply. We've already been over this. We don't mind helping you. We also don't mind having a roommate. Shota prayed Midoriya wouldn't put up a fight for once. For once he'd accept help and Shota could help the goddamn kid. Nobody should be out on the streets or not knowing where their next bed was going to be. I don't want to impose. You won't. Hisashi insists, Midoriya eyes still full of doubt. Shota remembers something Midoriya had told him what felt like ages ago. I don't want to rely on you because then it will be harder when you leave. We won't ditch you either. We won't just give you up when you prove to be a problem child or never listen. We're offering you a bed and food. That and a safe home where he could be cared about the way a child should. Deku still looked unsure. Midoriya, I won't starve or hit you. I care about you because you're a good person, remember? I'm offering because you deserve what should be a human right. But Present Mike, he mumbles. Do you like cats? Both Shota and Midoriya do a double take. Do I like cats? Yes. I mean kittens are cute. Well then there's nothing I can do. He's accepted. Hisashi gave Midoriya a cheeky grin. It won't be for long, right? Just till I can dash. Midoriya froze. Just till I can leave. The door's always open. Shota confirms. Midoriya, I don't know if you believe me, but I want you to live here. A very slow, hesitant nod. Don't tell anyone I'm here, or you know who I am and I'll stay. Not for long, just till I have somewhere else to stay. A safe place. Shota exists even though he has intentions of letting Midoriya move out. A safe place. Midoriya agrees and then it's settled. The kid is staying here and will be adopted. Izuku didn't understand Eraserhead's endgame. He showed repeated interest in him. Even after Izuku was stabbed and told him that he was quirkless. Eraserhead was still interested after he shared his whole tragic backstory. All Izuku wanted to know was why was he so interested in getting closer to him? Why did he try to make friends instead of throwing him in jail? Anytime Izuku pressed the issue, it was the same answer. I care about you. You're a good person. I don't want to see you getting hurt. Every time he let Eraserhead get closer, Izuku felt like kicking himself. He wanted to trust the man. Wanted to be naive and believe that Eraserhead approached him with only good intentions. But he couldn't fully allow himself to indulge in that fantasy. His past had proved he couldn't. Somewhere down the line, Eraserhead would get his objective or whatever he needed from Izuku. Then he would leave him. Which was why Izuku found himself doing a double take every morning when he woke to find Present Mic and Eraserhead grading assignments or drinking coffee. He didn't know why he allowed himself to be in this situation, but he did. So each morning when he was left alone, Izuku would do his own routine. Open the laptop and try and figure out somewhere else to live. Somehow, a month had passed. A safe place. Izuku muttered to himself as he once again scanned the laptop screen. He had been lying when he told Eraserhead that he'd find a safe place to stay in. Izuku was just grateful he had a place to stay, even if it was only for a few days. So color him surprised when Eraserhead refuses to let him leave. Izuku had shown him his plans of where he would stay, and Eraserhead disapproved of them each time. The first one was simply retiring back into the system, allowing some other family to pick him up for a little while. Eraserhead looked downright furious when Izuku made that suggestion. You're not leaving my house only to go to some stranger's place, where you will have to hide your vigilante, and due to your previous track record I can assume you'll be treated poorly. Not an option, you're staying here. Was what the adult had told him. That was when Izuku realized that Eraserhead was serious. He would not be leaving the apartment until he had a genuine plan of where to stay. On the plus side, living with Eraserhead and Present Mic wasn't so bad. His 12-year-old self would have a heart attack if you told him he'd be living with two heroes. His 12-year-old was stupid. At least Eraserhead and Present Mic were pretty good roommates. They never asked Izuku what he did when they were gone. They never followed him around or pried into his life. They still let him patrol and remain a vigilante. There was only one problem Izuku had with living with them. He was growing used to it, and starting to care about Shota and Yamada. He couldn't grow used to having a normal life. It only hurt that much more when it was finally taken away. So as each day passed, Izuku became more and more desperate to leave. To find some other place to stay. At the same time, however, a part of Izuku became more and more desperate to stay. Stay where he could get 3 meals a day, a shower every night, a warm bed with clean sheets. That's probably why Izuku hadn't left yet, even if it was fully in his power to leave. Which was why even after a month he was still cruising site after site trying to find a safe place to crash. Izuku checked his email. He had one unread email in his inbox. He clicked on it the moment the front door opened. I'm back, Ak. Izuku didn't even notice he smiled at the words. Present Mic. For a split second Izuku wanted to rush over to greet him. Instead he gave a wave from where he was seated on the couch. Honestly, how many times do Sho and I have to tell you? You don't need to call us by our hero names. Izuku could tell his face was red. Sorry, Yamada. He heard a short sigh from the hero. Both Aizawa and Yamada had told him dozens of times to call them by their names. Even after a month, Izuku could still barely manage to remind himself to call themselves by the family names. If Izuku had his way, he would still call them by their hero names. It would be a lot easier to try and stay detached that way. Is Aizawa not coming home? A loud chuckle from the kitchen, and Yamada joined Izuku in the living room. He had to sit in on some detentions. There were some incidents in the cafeteria. Izuku really wanted to ask what happened. He knew Aizawa was teaching 1A, meaning Kaken would be in the class. Given Kaken's incredible temper, he was probably involved in the issue. Izuku was slightly embarrassed to admit he kept close tabs on his past classmate. Who got in trouble? Monoma and Jairu. Izuku knew both of them. He had watched the sports festival. Monoma had a really amazing quirk and he beat Kaken. Which definitely wasn't satisfying at all. He remembered Jiru was the earjack girl. She'd been in a group with the invisible girl who Izuku could never remember her name no matter how many times he looked it up, the guy with the super strength quirk Sato, and finally the quiet guy with the animal quirk, Kota. Her group didn't do all that well, so she didn't get a lot of screen time. Izuku could only wonder what had. So apparently Monoma was insulting Class 1A because they've got this whole rivalry. You know, with all of last year 1A getting so much more attention, so he was saying some crap to try and get them to fight. He said something about Yaoyorozu and then Jiru poured her drink all over the guy. Yamada looked eagerly at Izuku when he finished his story. This seemed to be Yamada's way of getting closer to Izuku. He'd tell stories about his day and try to get Izuku as involved as possible. One of the craziest things Izuku had learnt was the UA teachers lived for gossip. They lived for the gossip about students and their lives. There were betting pools on love lives, grades, hero training, even how the students would rank once they were heroes. There was a betting pool with just about anything. So, does this event help you in your bet about Jiru's love life? One of the biggest betting circles was Year 2 of UA's hero course's Love Lives. Every class apparently had something unique to bet upon. Izuku thought it was crazy. Class 2A and Class 2B main betting was their love lives. According to Yamada, all the best love stories happen in the second year. Most of the first year is getting used to UA and most bets revolve around the sport festival and class rankings. In second year everyone knew each other really well, it was the perfect time for couples to get together. Once third year starts they become focused on graduating and hero work. No, this does not help me at all. See, I bet on Kaminari and Jiru. The electric kid? Yes, anyways Midnight bet on Jiru and Yaoyorozu and now her bet seems like it's the most likely to come true. Besides, I bet they'd be together by the end of the second year's first semester, but I might be off about it. Well, I'm sure you'll win some other bets. Yamada grumbled for a second. I swear these kids in 1A are making me broke. In 1B most of my bets are looking pretty good, but 1A is just frustrating. Izuku found himself smiling as Yamada broke down how these two students were perfect for each other, but both too stupid to do anything about it. Izuku tuned out bits and pieces of the conversation and focused back on the screen, the unread email displayed across his screen. Izuku read it 3 times over before finally realizing what it said. Hey Yamada, look at this. He shifted his screen so that Yamada could see it. I've been keeping tabs on this group home. Someone who I know works there, they said they'd email me when a bed opened up. They just emailed me saying a bed should be open in a week or 2. Great news, huh? Izuku lifted his head to stare at Yamada. He was not met with the man's usual smile and speech, which all ended in exclamation points. You found a place? Yup, it has government funding and everything. You sure it's safe? Yes. Did you even read what I showed you? Izuku said rather exasperatedly. Yamada didn't say anything more and they fell into awkward silence. What? Izuku asked. That was the deal. I'd stay here until I could figure something else out. You weren't supposed to. Yamada suddenly snaps, standing up. What do you mean? Is it not obvious? Now Yamada was the exasperated one. Are you really that stupid? You weren't supposed to find another place to live. You were going to stay here. With us. That wasn't the deal. Yamada ran a hand over his face. We didn't care about the deal. Something which felt like a knife pierced Izuku's chest. It made his lungs tighten, breathing suddenly became a lot harder. We made the deal so you would agree to stay here. We want you to stay with us. Just until I could find another place. Izuku insisted again, even though a sinking feeling told him that he was wrong. Permanently. You are going to stay with us permanently because we care about you. You're our kid. Yamada suddenly slapped a hand over his mouth. Izuku let the words register. Every cell in his body didn't trust that. He wasn't their kid. They took him in because he was a vigilante. It helped them to keep him close in case he committed even worse crimes. You're our kid. You're our kid. You're our kid. His lungs ached even more as he gripped the couch where he was still sitting tightly. Why your kid? Yamada looked even more freaked out than Izuku was sure he sounded. I'm not a kid, was the only response Izuku could think of. A long moment of silence passes. Those words seem to bounce around in his skull, repeating in his mind over and over again. The last month flashing before his eyes. Midoriya. Izuku was racing into his room after grabbing a chip bag for supper. Get your sorry butt out here and eat some real food for once. Yamada. Yes. Can you teach me some English? I kinda gave up trying to learn it. Midoriya, want some bagels? Aizawa holding up a plate of bagels, offering one to him. I thought I could eat more. See you soon, kiddo. I'm not a kid. Wait. Izuku screeched. You've never seen the All Might movies, but they're so good. Midoriya, you're limping. Did you get hurt on patrol? Midoriya, you're smart. Surely you didn't really think we just wanted you around for a few nights? Yamada appeared to be reeling himself in. His eyes were full of emotion, but his face was impassive. I don't understand. Yamada reached his arms out slowly. Izuku didn't move away from him, so the hands rested on top of his shoulders. We want you to live with us permanently. You're our stray. Izuku pet his head at the words, briefly looking over to their cat Charlie. No, he whispered quietly. No, this isn't permanent. You're just going to take care of me for a little while. Then you'll get bored or realize I'm more trouble than I'm worth or dash. You are rambling. Yamada cuts him off quickly. Midoriya, we don't want to get rid of you, not now or ever. We want you to be a part of our dashta. Instead of finishing his sentence, Yamada hesitantly gestures around him to the few photos on the wall, the empty kitchen, the hallway leading to the bedrooms. For a brief moment, Izuku swore Yamada's face shifted into his mother's. Family? Izuku asked tentatively, trying to finish off Yamada's sentence. He wanted a family. He wanted to have someone who loved him unconditionally. He wanted someone to celebrate birthdays and holidays. He wanted someone to hug him when he had nightmares. He wanted someone to be there. Family. Yamada confirms. Izuku risks a small smile. You won't get rid of me? Izuku can still feel a part of his brain telling him to run. This won't last, you'll only get hurt. A part of him wants to leave, but Izuku knows it's too late. He's already gotten attached to Yamada's stupid UA stories, Aizawa's horrible attempts at cooking, conversations not about attacking villains, waking up to sun making the small room far too hot, Aizawa's mother henning once. Patrol was over. He'd gotten too attached to all of it. We are not getting rid of you. Izuku shakily reaches for his computer and clicks on the response button. Nakahara. Thanks for letting me know about the open space, but I'm okay. I've got somewhere to stay now and I don't think I'll be leaving anytime soon. Midoriya. He hits the send button before he can think twice about it. We might have a slight problem. He says quietly. I'm currently supposed to be in a foster home on the other side of the city. Izuku shuffles once or twice. You're gonna have to explain to Child Protective Services that you want to foster me and get a license. Yamada laughs much to Izuku's surprise. If that's our biggest problem, we've got nothing to worry about, little listener. Shota and I got our foster license a week after you moved in. Izuku smiles and shuts his computer screen. Good. Was Shota nervous? Of course not. That was what he was trying to convince himself. His son roommate should be more nervous than him. For whatever strange reason, the green-haired boy seemed relatively at ease. If there was one thing Hisashi and Shota got good at, it was understanding when Midoriya was nervous. However, the kid wasn't fidgeting or mumbling or drawing shapes or words into his palms. He was staring out the window as they came closer and closer to UA. It was Hisashi who finally asked Midoriya if he wanted to visit for a class. Shota had been wanting his students to meet Midoriya for months. When they first told him, he declined to offer, rambling about how he was an illegal vigilante and shouldn't meet a class of future heroes. Finally, after a few weeks of contemplating, Midoriya agreed to meet 2A. Shota would be lying if he said he wasn't excited to see a bunch of his students get their buttes handed to them. A lot of them stood on very high pedestals due to their quirk's power. That is why if Midoriya fought them, it was a perfect lesson for the class. Unfortunately, the boy refused to visit as Izuku Midoriya. Shota had asked him to come in as a civilian instead of risking his status as a vigilante. Midoriya downright refused, demanding he be allowed to be in his mask and black suit. So as they pulled up to the front gates and made their way to Gym Gamma, where the 2A course was going to be in a matter of minutes, people were definitely staring. Nobody seemed to recognize him, not that they should be able to. Shota then stood waiting with Midoriya. He soon heard the loud shouts of his class. Midoriya stiffened ever so slightly. In walked all 20 of the UA Heroes Course 2A class. They all stared Midoriya down, but didn't say anything. Shota cleared his throat and the class went silent. Everyone, this is someone who I work closely with. He's going to spar with you guys. The class eyes lit up. As much as they loved fighting one another, fighting with someone new was very exciting. Alright, this will be a very simple sparring exercise. Your goal is to pin your opponent down. Once the opponent has been pinned, the spar is over. If neither person is pinned down after 10 minutes, it will be called a draw. The class nodded their heads excitedly. One more thing. You are fighting Quirkless. A lot of the students froze. Most had never even imagined of fighting Quirkless before. Mina was the one to speak. Shota knew she had decent hand-to-hand combat, so it surprised him. Sensei, why do we have to fight Quirkless? You should always be able to fight without a quirk. Midoriya says. There are a lot of quirks which can prevent you from using your own, like Aizawa's. Or you might have quirk suppressant's cuffs on if you've been kidnapped. A few people not so subtly glanced at Bakugo. Shota nodded. We spent a lot of first year developing your quirks to make them stronger. This year we want to spend some time making sure you can have better hand-to-hand combat without the help of your quirk. Some of you are very good at combat but dependent on your quirks. Shota didn't want to point out any names. Turns out he didn't have to. Midoriya offered his own opinion. Like Kirishima and Ojiro. You two are close combat fighters and no hand-to-hand combat, but you use your quirks a lot. The two fidgeted at being called out. Shota went over to pull names for the order they would fight Midoriya. Ida, Mina, Kaminari, Bakugo, Sato, Todoroki, Ojiro, Azui, Hagakure, Koda, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, Shiro, Mineta, Shoji, Aoyama, Uraraka, Jiru, Tokoyami, and finally Shinso. It was rather amusing to watch as Midoriya eyed his first opponent. No doubt the boy was analyzing Ida and trying to pick out what style of combat he may use. Although Midoriya really didn't need to, Shota saw his notebook. Midoriya broke down each and every one of the students in Class 2A. Frankly, they truly wouldn't stand a chance. Sensei, sir. Yes, Ida? Who is this person we are fighting? For a minute Shota genuinely thought Ida hadn't been paying attention, but Midoriya spoke. Does it really matter who I am? When you fight villains you normally don't know who they are. It's best to try and have similar situations so you adjust to it. If you always know everything about your opponent the moment you don't know everything, you'll die. You guys should know this firsthand after all your incidents with villains in your first year. There were many things Midoriya failed to tell Hisashi and himself. He never talked about his friends from middle school or asked to meet with them once he was in a safe home. He never again talked about this Kaken person who Shota heard him mumbling about. He had made assumptions it was a friend, and due to how closely Midoriya was watching UA, it was safe to assume it was someone in either 2A or 2B. Which was why after Midoriya spoke Shota picked up on a moment of confusion in Bakugo's face. I suppose not, sir. Shota came back to reality as Ida answered Midoriya. There were still a lot of looks of uncertainty from many people in the class as they glanced Midoriya up and down. The teenager wasn't tall and he wasn't overly muscular either. Shota was sure everyone was trying to figure out why he was good enough to spar with them. Midoriya seemed to pick up on their confusion and worry about the fight. But don't worry if you get uncomfortable at any time or you get hurt, you can tap out. Make a fist with your hand and hit the ground 3 times. That's my signal for tapping out, so if we could use that today it would be great. When you hit your fist 3 times your partner has to stop the fight. Immediately. Bakugo scoffs. Only wimps tap out. A real hero doesn't give up. Then he turns his glare from Midoriya to Todoroki. Or half but everything they do. The teen as per usual did nothing to respond to Bakugo's taunts. It is not a sign of weakness to tap out. Midoriya says with a ferocity Shota hadn't heard before. Crap, Midoriya was said. I learnt that the hard way and trust me it wasn't fun. If you are uncomfortable or in pain you tap out. There is no point in injuring yourselves to win a fight you don't have to. You can't be a hero if you run away like a baby at every fight. Besides, Recovery Girl will patch us up quickly anyway. What if Recovery Girl isn't there? You don't realize how privileged you are to have someone who can immediately heal your wounds. Broken ribs hurt like hell, don't even get me started on stab wounds. If you for any reason you do not want to fight any longer, you will tap out. If people hadn't been wary of Midoriya now, they were. His eyes seemed to peer into Bakugo's head, and then destroy him. Bakugo gave a long sigh and didn't bother fighting any further on the issue. With that Shota motioned to Ida. The blue-haired boy made his way over to the middle of the gym. Midoriya followed from behind. I look forward to our fight, Ida said with his usual enthusiasm. Midoriya's eyes crinkled. Shota knew for a fact that Midoriya had a small smile. Good luck. Midoriya and Ida stand a few feet apart and wait for the go from Shota. Once approved, the two launched into battle. Ida had always used his legs to fight and continued to do so. Midoriya was on the defense as Ida laid kick after kick, most dodged and a very few blocked. Everyone can tell that Ida looks in a better position. They then watch as Midoriya jumps and grabs Ida's shoulders with his hands to vault over the boy. Once the green-haired boy landed, he makes a motion, similar to karate chop on the left side of Ida's neck. As soon as he makes contact with Ida's neck, he falls somewhat slowly to the ground. Midoriya quickly clambers on top of him and then he's pinned. That was fun, Midoriya says with a cheeky smile as he gets off Ida. To say the class was all staring with their mouths open would be exactly correct. How did you do that? Uraraka asks with awe as Midoriya brings Ida to his feet. It's called the vagus nerve. It runs from dash, Midoriya points to his heart, your heart all the way up to your left ear canal. When you hit it hard enough you can make the person pass out. He gestures to an area of the neck. This is the best area to try and hit the nerve. You might totally miss the nerve though, it's like a 50-50 chance when I do it. When you hit the nerve, not too hard or they will pass out, it will make your opponent really dizzy, which is why Ida fell. Safe to say a few people were nervous as Midoriya smiled brightly at the class. Who is next? Mina steps forward as Ida, who is still disorientated, goes to join his class. Once Shota gives the go, the two students jump into the fight. It's made obvious very early on that Mina knows what she is doing. She dodges and blocks Midoriya quite well. Unlike the last fight where it appeared that Midoriya was overwhelmed, it was the other way around. Mina was dealing with punches and kicks left, right and center. It wasn't too much longer before Midoriya swept her feet out from under her and she landed with a very loud oomph. Once more Midoriya works at record speed to pin her arms behind her. He holds her like that for 10 seconds before releasing. This time Midoriya's opponent is able to get up immediately afterwards, which causes a slight relief for Shota. Dude, that was awesome. Kirishima praises Midoriya, who Shota is confident is blushing at the praise. You took Mina down. Just like that. He didn't take me down. It was kinda lucky. Mina insists. She smiles at Midoriya though. Next time I'll beat ya. Looking forward to it. Next is Kaminari, and Shota already knows how this will go down. Kaminari, while knowing the basics, is very quirk-dependent, which is why when the fight ends in 2 minutes, Shota isn't particularly surprised. Then Bakugo laughs and steps forward. My turn, you dim and extras. Time to show you guys what a real fight looks like. He smiles cruelly at Midoriya. I'll crush you to a pulp. Shota notices as Kirishima winces slightly at the words. Why is he so mean? The boy complains quietly to his friends. It is in his blood. Have you seen his mother? She's like twice as scary. Kaminari responds laughing lightly. Shiro nods his head in agreement. Better than last year though. Remember when he kept telling all of us to die? That got a few solemn nods. He's still an a-hole. Mina whispers. But he's an a-hole who is sometimes nice. That causes a loud laugh from Kaminari and Shota glares. Silence. Bakugo Katsuki. Midoriya says, evaluating him as Bakugo enters the middle of the gymnasium. He gets a simple growl in response. Don't forget. Midoriya says cheekily. If you ever get overwhelmed you can always tap out. Bakugo downright screams in retaliation. I'm so gonna kill you. Demon, I spoke too soon. Sero whispers in defeat as Bakugo charges at Midoriya. Shota didn't even say they could begin fighting. He doesn't miss Kirishima's long sigh at Bakugo's threat. The poor kid, at this rate Hisashi might lose on his bet. The two teenagers engage in battle and it is hard to keep track of. Punch, dodge, but the cycle goes on and on each student predicting what the other will do. As the minutes wear on and on Shota feels the urge to call the match. He is aware that a 10-minute timer is set but his gut is screaming at him to do something. For some reason this match just feels all kinds of wrong. Then it happens, the two are a foot or two away from one another. They are catching their breaths when Midoriya reaches up to his face. He begins to lower the mask. Keep your demon mask on. Shota shouts but it falls on deaf ears. Midoriya pulls the mask off fully and everyone watches as Bakugo's eyes widen in surprise. Only Jairu is able to pick up Bakugo's soft whisper. Deku. With Bakugo stunned, Midoriya makes his move. He knocks Bakugo over with a punch and restrains him. He smiles again, this time however the class can see his mouth as he smiles. This smile is rather sadistic. Well, isn't this fun, Kaken? Shota isages in a breath. Kaken. Kaken was Bakugo? The blonde begins struggling in Midoriya's hold, they can hear his grumbles and muffled shouts. But, Demon Deku. Let me go. Get off you butt. Slowly as if Midoriya doesn't want to, he allows Bakugo to stand up. Everyone is watching closely as Bakugo wraps his hands around Midoriya's collar. What the hell, Deku? Shota processes the nickname Bakugo had been using. Was Bakugo the reason Midoriya chose to have his hero name be Deku? You vanish and just turn up at you goddamn nerd. What the hell? Midoriya laughs. It was for dramatic effect. Dramatic effect my butt? Where have you been? You can't just fucking vanish in the last year of middle school. He shakes Midoriya a few more times, his head jerking with each shake. Shota makes a step forward but Midoriya waves him off. I went to lots of places. Midoriya says with a smile. Now let me go, Kaken. Kaken? Kirishima says loudly. Bakugo makes no move to drop the boy, so Midoriya kicks him. Bakugo drops him immediately. You disappear for 2 years and then just turn up at UA? And you can fight? What the actual hell, Deku? I was busy. Was the only response Midoriya seemed able to give. Although Shota could tell by the gleam in his eyes, Midoriya was loving this. Who are you? It is Shinso that asks, which is a surprise. The boy is normally silent. I'm Izuku Midoriya. The brainwashing happens instantly, Midoriya's eyes glaze over. Shinso gets a few hard nudges from his classmates. Shinso tilts his head before releasing his quirk. Shota had made eye contact with him. Sorry, sensei. Shinso says, not sounding very sorry at all. Whoa! Midoriya shouts. That was so weird. It was like I was floating. I watched you during the Spirits Festival and your quirk was awesome. It's even cooler in person though. But you never answered my question. Where the hell have you been? The attention shifted back to Bakugo. Midoriya shuffled his feet. I'm kinda busy, Kaken. I don't care. Where on earth have you been? Auntie Inko dies and then a few months later you vanish. I thought you were dead or something. Well, I'm obviously not dead. The class's eyes ping-ponged between the two of them. This is better than TV. Mina whispers. Shui won't hear the rest. Hagakure says as she shushes the group. Deku. Answer me. I was homeschooled. The boy spat out rather sarcastically. Did it ever occur that I didn't ever want to see your face again? Bakugo scowled. Well, my parents made some big deal about you running away. My parents wasted time looking for your butt. I never run away. And I never asked them to look for me. Well, I still had to deal with all that shit. So tell me what the F happened. Bakugo. The use of his last name shuts Bakugo up. He pauses, eyes contemplating. We're talking later, nerd. Midoriya shakes his head, frowning. So, there is a very long pause. I told you guys my name. I grew up with Kaken. He runs his hand through his curls and gestured to the area where he had been sparring. Who's next? Nobody moves forward. So you knew Bakugo? Jair finally asks. Yes. Midoriya condones. Was he still a prick in middle school? Todoroki's monotone voice rang through the building. Bakugo glares. Shut up, half and half. Yes, he was a prick. He never had any friends, right? That was Kaminari. 'Cause he's all like, die, and Lord Explosion. Honestly, I think we are all saints for putting up with him. Shota watches as Midoriya attempts and fails to hold back a laugh. Dunce face. Yeah. Shut up. And I'm not done with you, shitty nerd. That's enough. Shota finally cuts in. Midoriya seemed to be handling the situation for his own enjoyment, but certainly not handling it well. Now they were getting off track. He was just hoping nobody thought too hard on why Midoriya was wearing a mask. The last thing we needed for his class was to discover he was a vigilante. Now that you guys have had your little reunion, let's move on. Aizawa-sensei. I want to ask him stuff. We need dirt on Bakugo-sensei. Classmates, this is inexcusable behavior. We should listen to Aizawa-sensei. Sato, you're up. Izuku stretched out his arms a few times. 2A was rather predictable when they fought. Much like he had predicted, only a few of the people actually surprised him. Luckily, he managed to pull off 20 straight wins. In reality, he lucked out against Todoroki and Shinso. It was very obvious both of them had martial arts training and fought regularly without their quirks. While others were good, those two are on a different level. All in all, it was a pretty good afternoon. Aizawa sent his students to spar amongst one another. Izuku gulped as he saw the man's frown as Aizawa finally made his way to Izuku. He knew revealing his identity would have consequences. As long as he didn't get kicked out. Hey Aizawa, he said nervously, sporting a small smile. Midoriya, why on earth would you take your mask off? It was the only way I could think of beating Kaken. So you risked exposing your identity and ending up in a jail cell to beat someone in a sparring match? Yes. Sometimes I really wonder if you have any working brain cells. What if dash? It was the only way. Kaken's amazing. I needed a surprise factor to beat him. The only one I could think of was me. Izuku could tell Aizawa was really close to snapping at him. That doesn't justify your actions. I know. Izuku paused, trying to keep his voice neutral. But I wanted to prove that I could beat him. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. Is this about you and Bakugo's past? Aizawa asked tentatively. Is this why you didn't tell me about him? It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to win. Izuku crossed his arms over his chest, closing off his body language, making it painfully obvious that he was done with the conversation. I'd like to talk about more at home if you're comfortable. You're also doing dishes for the rest of the week because of the whole identity stunt you pulled. Izuku nodded his head and walked over to sit by the wall. It was really weird seeing Kaken again. The boy was just as Izuku remembered him in middle school. The only thing that seemed to change was his friends. From what Izuku had noticed and listened to, they actually somewhat liked him. Nobody ever really liked Kaken. They just followed him so they wouldn't be bullied. These people seemed to care about Kaken. Izuku was glad Kaken found someone to put up with him, even if he felt a little bitter. He was probably going to get yelled at again. Kaken was set at him, but it was worth seeing his surprised. The blonde was still glaring at him from where he fought with Kaminari. The poor kid was getting hit with brutal assaults from Kaken. The way Kaken was glaring at him, he could tell the message Kaken was trying to tell him. He better not met with Kaken alone after this class. He really didn't want to miss time on patrol because of some bruises, especially since his hours were reduced after starting to live with Aizawa and Yamada. Since he was a guest, he needs a teacher's supervision at all times. So he couldn't leave and go back home. Izuku did want to fight or just offer some advice to everyone sparring, but every time he shifted though he could feel the weight of Bakugo's stare. Which was why he was much more comfortable where he was on the ground. He didn't want to listen to the boys' annoying yelling. That was until Aizawa called him over. I didn't bring you to UA just so you could beat all my students. Help them. His friend? Roommate? Companion? Landlord? Partner? Said his voice ice cold. It was very clear Aizawa was still angry with him. Yes, sir. With that, Midoriya moved to the opposite side of the gym to where Kaken wasn't. He shifted through the pairs, watching each of them. Stop! He burst between two people. What? Huh. The grape guy Mineta and his partner Kirishima were fighting. It is bad to say the least. The two were at totally different skill levels. I don't think you guys should be partners. A frown from Kirishima sent Izuku to mini panic. Not that you guys are like doing anything wrong. Kirishima had a lot more experience with martial arts than Mineta does. Frankly, you're just tossing him to the ground and Mineta does nothing about it. And then your height difference, although Mineta you're really short, so I don't think anyone is really best suited for your spar. But you should at least work with someone at a similar skill level. Otherwise you're just getting beat up over and over. Izuku scanned the class and their partners. Most had stuck with what Izuku could assume were their friends. Thankfully most of them had very similar skill sets. The ones who had the best fighting abilities were Shinso, Kirishima, Todoroki, Mina, Bakugo, Sato and Uraraka. Can I partner with a girl? Mineta's tone instantly set off a few bells in Midoriya's head. He sounded a bit like the men he had to deal with who were outside bars at midnight looking for a place to stay the night. Honestly probably you should go with someone like Koda. Neither of you have any experience with fighting. Izuku didn't want to say anything rude to Mineta, but he could tell the purple-haired boy had never bothered to learn how to fight. The fact somebody was in the hero course and barely had grasp of the basics of fighting was infuriating. Even though his quirk wasn't particularly strong, Mineta seemed to rely on it. Koda was different. He could tell it wasn't that Koda didn't care about fighting, it was that the kid was petrified to fight. Mineta grumbled a few times at losing the chance at fighting with a girl. Kirishima, are you good then? Yes, thanks Midoriya. The boy smiled brightly, showing off his shark-like teeth. Izuku didn't want to make assumptions, but Kirishima seemed happier to be fighting someone new. Izuku continued to monitor different groups and give advice where he could. Then he could hear a very loud and familiar yelling. Why won't you fight mu half in, half yesterday? Izuku sighed with annoyance. Kaken. After a glance at Aizawa, it was pretty easy to determine he wasn't going to do anything. Based on the rest of 2's reaction, this was also a common occurrence. Icy hot. Fight me. No. Todoroki continued to ignore Bakugo and completely left the boy, who still happened to be yelling. Todoroki was walking to the other side of the gym and passed Izuku. Todoroki. Yes. Why does Kaken hate you so much? Izuku tried to watch the boy's face for any giveaways in his emotions. However, the boy stayed strangely impassive. It looked almost unnatural. He keeps yelling about how you don't respect him and you don't try hard. Why? I thought you watched the sports festival? I did. So you know my quirk? Yes. And you know who I only use my left side? Yes, I remember that. You wanted to win the tournament without using your fire. You said that after winning the obstacle course. I never want to use my fire. Realization set in, that's why Kaken hated him. It wasn't a one-time occasion where Todoroki wasn't using his full power. He never used his full power. That's stupid. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. I mean, if I had a quirk dash. You don't have a quirk? Did I not mention that? Well, I don't have a quirk, and if I had yours I'd use it all the time. You're being selfish. You don't understand. Quirks are scary. There are so many people whose quirks cause them more harm than good. I've seen it. However, it isn't your quirk that's causing you harm. It's your head, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Millions of people would give everything to be in your place. And you're not even trying. You've been given this power and you won't even use it. It's not my power. Well, unless you somehow can steal the quirk, it is your power. No, it is my father's power. Does your father's quirk have the name, half cold, half hot? Izuku asked, finally letting his irritation slip into his voice. No, he doesn't. Meaning it's your quirk and a completely different makeup than your father's. So stop wasting your time by being less than who you are. Izuku finishes with a long breath and slowly processes what he just said. Before he could say anything else, however, Todoroki was gone. Izuku doesn't bother seeking him out. He continued making rounds. He ended up making friends with both Uraraka and Ida. The both kept asking him for advice about fighting, so Izuku mainly stayed focused on them after talking to Todoroki. After what felt like a horribly long class, it was finally called to an end. Then Aizawa turned to Izuku. "Time to get you home." Izuku let out a long sigh of relief. He wanted to come to UA, but they were all exhausting. As he made his way from the class, his mind for once was rather quiet. It was a peaceful afternoon, the clouds were few and far between. Even if Izuku was bound for a night of yelling, dishes, and maybe patrol if he was lucky, he was content with where he was. He didn't have any problems or any goals. For once, even for a little while, he could just enjoy everything he'd gotten. He'd beat Kaken, so everything was fine.